Good morning, everybody. My name is Rob Lawler, and welcome to the third installment of our Business Leadership Forum. We will spend 60 minutes this morning covering a very timely topic, getting back to the office post-COVID, presented by Enterprise Bank. My name is Rob Lawler, and I'm the Sales and Relationship Manager here at the bank. Enterprise Bank has grown to $5 billion in assets by serving our communities for over 30 years to help creating successful businesses, individuals, and nonprofits by offering a combination of exceptional personal interactions with state-of-the-art services like commercial loans, cash management, wealth management, mortgages, commercial insurance, and retirement solutions. The bank has also been recognized by the Boston Globe as one of the top employers in Massachusetts for the past 8 years, and one of the top companies in Massachusetts for volunteer hours as well. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's moderator and great friend, Ken Anson. In addition to Ken serving on Enterprise Bank's board of directors, he is also a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist. With no further ado, Ken.
Terrific. Good morning, Rob, and good morning, everybody. It's appropriate that I'm coming to you from my guest room bunker here at home because this is really where I've been for most meetings and most of my daylight hours for the past 14 months. And I know many of you are in similar circumstances. This is a very timely topic, as Rob said. And as I was scanning the newspapers over the last week, a few headlines jumped out at me, and I'm sure you can relate to some of them. Wall Street Journal, May 16th, how to rally a jittery workforce back to the office. Should you go back to the office is another one. And then one on Fox Business says that a survey done by Robert Half shows that a third of remote workers may quit if called back to the office full time. There seems to be a divide between the tech industry and the financial services industry around this topic. So where do we go from here? We have three excellent subject experts on our panel this morning, and each will make a 10 to 15 minute presentation with Q&A following each presentation. I'll be monitoring the Q&A as we go through, and so either I'll ask questions during a pause if appropriate, or at the end of their presentations. Following those presentations, we'll have a live roundtable, including those experts, where you will enjoy hearing what they believe around pertinent questions, including, is remote work here to stay? Does it depend on the sector that the employees are in? Are remote workers as productive, more productive, as productive than at the office workers? What role do our families play in all of this, given that they've had many of us around the house uninvited for the past 14 months than ever? I'll be sure to conclude the roundtable to allow for a few more minutes of Q&A at the end, and we're shooting for around a 60-minute presentation in total, as Rob mentioned. I'll ask those not speaking to please mute their microphones and cameras. And also I'll note that questions which were submitted in advance, we've shared with the presenters, and they will do their best to answer some of those questions within the body of their presentation. So without further ado, the first presenter I'd like to welcome is Jamie Gabriel. Jamie is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Enterprise. She's an Executive Vice President. She's been at the center of the action since COVID first began and has been helping over 550 Enterprise employees figure out how to do their job safely and remotely as appropriate during the pandemic. And now as we emerge from the pandemic, and it gives me great pleasure to turn the floor over to Jamie.
Thank you so much, Ken. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. You know, as I was thinking about post-COVID and what the future of our workforce may be at Enterprise Bank, I reflected upon, where we were in March of 2021 and the journey that we've been through since then. As Ken mentioned, we have about 550 Enterprise team members. And of course, when the COVID pandemic hit, safety was our top priority for our team. And as an essential business, we also were required to stay open and serve customers. So about a third of our team members were required to be on site to serve our customers. And at that time, our customer service team members were busier than ever. So as you know, as you probably know, we have a large portfolio of business customers, and many of those businesses had to close for a period of time. There was a lot of market volatility that we were helping our wealth customers work through. We're in the middle of a mortgage boom. So our customer facing areas were as busy as ever, as were the operations team members. So to add to that, we moved a lot of our team members, 2/3, to remote. And we did that probably within 3 to 4 weeks. So a lot of us who weren't in customer facing areas, HR, risk management, branch and operation department heads, our jobs changed overnight with pandemic response, change management, communication, how to navigate remote work, just getting everyone onto the remote work platform. How do we manage on-site and remote engagement? And what do we need to do to enhance our wellness offerings? Because it was a scary and uncertain time. There were so many days we asked ourselves, are we doing the right thing? We jumped in head first with Paycheck Protection Program processing. We did several hundred loans overnight. And at that time, we had about 100 team members from other positions in the bank jump in to support the processing of our business customers' PPP loans. Much of that was done with remote training, remote processing, and new digital applications and tools. When 100 of our team members agreed to do a job that wasn't their own, we learned that our people first philosophy, which is to take care of each other, take care of our customers, and take care of our communities, was really alive in our bank. This was kind of the core philosophy of our culture, and it was really impressive to see what everyone was willing to do to help our customers. I think, in fact, our focus on our customers really gave our team members some purpose during this uncertain and fearful time. It also gave us an opportunity to have a more digital focus on how we serve the customers. As the pandemic continued to move on, we quickly realized we needed to find new ways to thank, appreciate, and reward those who were on site while also keeping them safe. We also worked to make sure there was cohesiveness and communication lines open between on-site and remote teams to be sure customers were serviced at the high level we expected. We assisted managers with managing remote teams at this level they had never done that before. We also implemented a childcare leave program to support our team members who were managing remote learning. Lots of different variables in play as the pandemic journey kind of continued. We also quickly found the deficiencies in our infrastructure around remote work, some of which we could address easily, and some that required workarounds, and it'll take much longer post-pandemic to work through. And that really, the journey that we've kind of gone through and what we've learned during that process is really kind of shaping, I guess, our post-COVID view of the work environment. And I hesitate to say post-COVID because I'm not sure what post-COVID means. It could be post-COVID emergency. But so as we look to the future, our focus is to seamlessly serve the customers both digitally and in branch. The pandemic has accelerated our focus on the digital channel, end-to-end efficient processing, and reducing paper. Our digital channel will be key to our customer experience moving forward, and it will be to augment our highly personalized service, which will remain a top priority and what our customers have known to expect and appreciate about banking with us. So as I think about the challenges that we're facing right now, and as we look to the future, hiring and retaining top talent to accomplish the goals and to provide that top service is critical to our success. Those who work with us off-site will have some expectation of continued off-site work, and some that want to join the bank will have some expectation of continued off-site work. So another challenge is to maintain our strong team-oriented culture where we have a high level of trust that has been built over time. So I guess as we look to the future, some of the high-level things that we're thinking about, and again, I have a lot of great enterprise bankers that help us out with the details of this, and this is really the high-level view. So we're looking at which roles might be most effective working on site or mobile between multiple locations. What are some of the total rewards program offerings that we need to consider for on-site team members to reward them and appreciate that they are always on site? What do we need to do to upgrade our telephonic, video conferencing, and collaboration tools? And when we think about collaboration, which types of roles may require to collaborate with other types of roles, and what level of expectation might there be to do that in person when it's safe? We have a focus on training and developing our managers on managing in a mixed mode work environment. We're enhancing our team building approach and looking at what do we need to do when we can gather all together safely and having all team gatherings. Because if I know our enterprise bankers know this, but what some of you may not know is that pre-pandemic, we did a lot of gatherings, and our gatherings all revolved around eating. So those were the fun times that we had together, and that builds teamwork and camaraderie. And hopefully when it's safe, we'll be able to do that. We just may need to be doing that and executing on that in a different way. We're going to determine how to best evaluate and manage performance, making sure that we're recognizing strong performance regardless of location, whether on-site, off-site, or mobile. And what do we need to do to make sure our on-site workspace is as attractive as it can be for team members to return? So again, these are some of the things that we're thinking about at a high level post-pandemic. However, the pandemic is elusive, and I know organizations like ours and yours, right at the moment, we're trying to figure out how to unwind from the protocols of the pandemic. The CDC guidance recently came out between vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. There's been changes in the reopening guidance in New Hampshire, and upcoming there will be in Massachusetts. And I make a note of this because I know a number of questions we sent in advance were in this regard. So I first want to just make a note. I'm not an employment attorney. I know enough to stay out of trouble. But what you can and can do legally as it relates to requiring vaccination, asking about the vaccination really depends on your industry, your work environment, whether you're servicing the public, and each industry probably has some different considerations. But I guess I'd like to share with you my view that as things that you can consider. My view as an HR professional. So, I mean, think about your company and your culture and your values. You still want your employees to feel safe. Actually, OSHA says we have to provide a work environment free of hazard. I think you need to make sure you understand that those who are unvaccinated may have valid, legally protected reasons for not getting vaccinated, medical or religious, or they may have personal reasons. We should take a human approach, with respect and understanding for everyone and where they may be. There's also, some question about, well, what if someone has had COVID in the last 90 days and they can't get vaccinated? What are some other things you may be able to do to keep your employees safe? Can they physically distance? Should everyone still follow good hygiene and sanitization protocols? Is there a middle ground without drawing a line in the sand between vaccinated and unvaccinated? And these are a lot of the questions that we're asking ourselves at the bank. If you choose to allow vaccinated employees to not wear a mask, a few things you may want to be aware of regarding your treatment of unvaccinated individuals. Be sure to protect them from what could be perceived as bullying behavior. Be aware that you're not treating unvaccinated individuals differently in hiring, promoting, advancing, work assignments, the ability to earn compensation, anything that could be perceived as vaccination discrimination. I know Ken was talking about reading articles over the last couple of weeks. I've seen vaccination discrimination, and this appears that it could become a thing. So I think it's just making sure that we're considering all the variables between unvaccinated and vaccinated individuals and taking that human approach. Another thing to consider is many people need to relearn how to be around others. We've asked them to stay at home, to stay in their small groups. And this is going to be a bit of a change for some people. And so I guess, my last piece of advice, I guess, if you will, is to meet each person where they're at. That's the approach that we try to take. And each person has a unique and perspective on things. And it's important to honor that and to hear what their unique perspective is and to try to meet the person where they're at and help them along through the process.
Thanks, Jamie. That was terrific. And I have a follow-up before we let you off the hook for the next
Great.
few minutes. Can you speak for just a minute or two on recruitment today? Because we're hearing, and we as employers are seeing in many corners that it's harder than ever to recruit. And are you seeing that at the bank? And what's your take on that?
We certainly are with specific positions. So what's been interesting is that pre-pandemic there were certain roles, certain particular departments where we might have had more trouble recruiting, and in other areas like our branches that we didn't have as much difficulty. So it's a little bit of a flip-flop today, and that we're having some difficulty in positions that we didn't in the past, and we're having an easier time with other positions where we had some difficulty. So, it is requiring us to take a little bit of a different approach to recruiting than we had in the past. And what I mean by that is, really saying, okay, well, what do we need to do to attract candidates to these types of positions? And do we need to be working with an outside firm to help us with those? I think in a lot of cases, the remote learning that was going on required some people to stay home. And so now that has shifted, or as the school year comes to an end, I think we'll start to hopefully see a little bit of a shift in that regard. And again, also, vaccination, a lot more people having had an opportunity to get vaccinated as the protocols start to wane. Hopefully we'll start to see a little bit of a shift, but it has been a little bit more challenging. And also what we've seen in the process is, expectation from some candidates that they may have an opportunity to continue to work remotely in some way into the future. So very different pre-pandemic as to where we are today. But I'm optimistic that with some of the changes, some of that will start to correct itself.
Terrific. Thanks, Jamie. As the moderator of this webinar, I am terrified of pushing the wrong button. So as Rob has us going from mute to no video to video, you sort of say a little prayer before you push the button that everybody comes back. So far, so good. Perfect timing, David. David Modell is the COO of Triton Systems up in Chelmsford, a technology incubator and developer of breathtaking products, and I would say very cool as well, for various sectors, including defense, healthcare, and industry. Looking forward to your take, David. Take it from here.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ken. Thanks also to Rob and to Andrew and the whole enterprise crew for setting this up. I think it's a great topic, and a lot of interesting things come out of it, as Jamie mentioned. So I'll give you just a kind of a brief walkthrough of our journey that we went through, starting 14 months ago to where we are, and then maybe branch off into some of the topics that Jamie touched on. So as Ken mentioned, we're a defense contractor in the local area. And when COVID hit, I would say, we were kind of flat-footed. We really didn't know what to do. We do a lot of development work, product development work, and so we're lab intensive. People need to come into the lab spaces and do their work. But we're also a lot of engineers and scientists, so there's a strong component of work that can be done remotely. Not all the tools at that time were in place, but certainly people were used to going home, logging into our virtual network, doing work. So that tradition had already been there. It was something that became a strength for us because we had knowledge that we could do work remotely. But we really didn't know. I didn't know, for example, whether state troopers would be stopping people on the roads, asking why they're driving. We really had no idea. So immediately we did two things. The first thing was, because we are a defense contractor, the government, the Defense Department had released a list of critical industries, essential industries, and defense contractors were on that list. So I reproduced the piece of the legislation from Governor Baker that referenced that and appended it to a letter that basically said the employee works for a critical industry and he or she is needs to go to the lab, and therefore it's acceptable to do that, blah, blah, blah. So I sent that out to everybody. I said, make a copy and put it in your car, just in case. And I've never heard anybody actually needing it, but I think it gave some people, some comfort on that. The second thing we did, more important really in hindsight, is a very intensive cleaning and an intensive cleaning protocol. So we would clean everything every day. We wiped down all surfaces, all, places where people touched, and all those spaces. And again, in hindsight, the science shows that it's not so much a surface transmitted virus, but gave important comfort at the time. Now, what we couldn't do really was deal with the airborne, in a way that would be truly safe at that time. So we didn't yet know about masks being like a full thing. We certainly said anytime you're meeting with others, you must wear a mask. But we were lax in the beginning about, for example, wearing a mask when you're sitting at your desk. Over time, we increased that as it became more apparent that it was an airborne transmitted virus. And so people were wearing masks, and we were pretty vigilant about masking. So those things helped us. We wanted, and it was always the case, and I think Jamie touched on this, we always wanted it to be, if you need to come to work, we want you to feel comfortable coming to work. And if you don't feel comfortable coming to work, or you don't need to come to work, then don't come to work. And we have to give you the tools to work remotely. So we began upgrading our meeting communications infrastructure, obviously Zoom. We are, as I said, in defense, so we had to navigate some of the cyber issues around that, which is a whole nother topic. Increased use of Microsoft Teams, and lots of ways to ease document sharing and so forth. So we were able to kind of work our way through, I think, most of the issues early, but nevertheless, stuff happens. Some employees lived in an extended family situation, caught COVID from relatives, or didn't want to give COVID to older relatives, so stayed home. We had one employee who I still don't understand, went to a bar, was eating with someone who was supposed to be COVID-free, turned out not COVID-free. Wow, who would have thought that, right? And, so we had these kind of incidents, and they were isolated, and we did our own form of contact tracing. We made sure we knew everybody's sort of living situation. If anyone caught COVID or thought they were, actually anyone who thought they were exposed to COVID, we immediately said, go get a test, we'll pay for it, just go get it. And everybody who worked in that group, please go home till we know. And if somebody was actually exposed and tested positive, the whole group had to stay home for, get tested and stay home until they're clear, either a negative test or wait out the full 2 weeks. Completely cleaned or isolated that area and so forth. So we were lucky, I think, vigilant, but lucky in that we had isolated outbreaks only, and we kept those isolated. I was always worried that we would have a wave, just an uncontrollable wave that would take, half the workforce out, and we would be forced to completely shut down because we couldn't control it. But that didn't happen. So, so I think in hindsight, I think we did it all right. We learned a lot of things, and this was touched on Jamie's as well. I believe the pandemic has accelerated trends that were already happening, didn't make new trends. So the trend to remote work, the trend to remote communication tools was already happening, but it certainly accelerated our need to get on with it and make those investments, which we did. I think that we have a more flexible approach to work now than we would have had, and we wouldn't have thought. And nobody, I think this is common across industries, I think it could not have been predicted how productive people can do remote work. And I have to identify here that an unfortunate piece of this is, again, the knowledge gap. So if you're a knowledge worker, if you're an engineer, banker, consultant, et cetera, I think remote work is, with today's technology, remote work can be highly efficient. But if you're an in-person worker, custodial, food service, construction, whatever, you don't have that luxury. And so we do have a kind of a knowledge gap, let's say, in the professions that socially we have to understand. But from our standpoint, I think we have a better balance now than we had when we started. And so that leads us to the next piece, which is what Jamie also spent time on, is the post-COVID, getting back to work kind of thing. We have sort of an open office cube culture, so there's a lot of shared space. People are coming back. They want to come back. I would say we're somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 population in the office at this point. And recently announced, of course, is the mask-free rule from Massachusetts if you're fully vaccinated. So we have also promoted that and said that if you're fully vaccinated and 10 days, obviously, post-vaccination, then you can go mask-free. But if you're not vaccinated for whatever reason, or you're in the process not yet completed, you must wear a mask. And so that moves into the questions that Jamie and other people have asked about, are you creating a stigma? Is there a chance for discrimination? And I would say, first of all, the answer is yes. I don't see a way, if you want to quote unquote reward those who did get vaccinated by allowing them to go mask free and yet protect everyone, that you could possibly not have a two-tier system. You can't say everybody can go mask free because it's not yet shown that that would be safe. And if you said, well, we still have to wear masks because a few of you haven't gotten vaccinated, that wouldn't be good either. I think that would lead to more recrimination. So I believe that adults should make informed choices. I agree with Jamie that we have to be sensitive to the reasons why people might not wear masks, but I don't see a way out at this point to not make it clear that if you chose or didn't get vaccinated, you must wear a mask, and people have to then make their own choices. Now, I think there are three groups of people. I think the proactive people, by and large, adults, have already been vaccinated. And the people for either religious, social, personal reasons choose not to get vaccinated, probably won't be vaccinated for a while. But there's a large middle ground. We have a lot of young people, and I think they just they didn't think it was important enough, or they're too busy, they didn't make time for it. And I believe that because there's a reward here to go maskless, and there will be some social pressure, there's no doubt. I think that group will be induced to go get a vaccine. And that's a good thing. I think we should encourage that. So I think we can't go backwards. We've come too far. We've endured this year, and we really need to stay safe. We want people to engage socially and collaboratively. Just the fact of removing the mask and seeing your mouth, I never realized. I always thought the eyes were the most important, but seeing the whole face is really quite a thing. So we're very encouraged, and we look forward to that, but we can't. I just don't see how we can not create this two-tier system. So those are sort of my prepared remarks. Ken, you want me to address any of these questions?
We have two questions so far that just came in this morning, and Jamie is going to handle Lori's later, but Neil submitted one just a minute ago. Do you have access to that? I can read it to you right now.
Yeah,
Thoughts on ways to bridge the potential staff culture divide between those who can be remote/flexible and those who can't. The flexibility seems like it might be considered a benefit, and what would be the equivalent benefit for on-site workers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think we have technicians who really have to be in the lab all the time. The majority of our employees really have a choice in many of their tasks to do it remotely or on-site. As I said earlier, and Jamie mentioned, and I want to reflect back on some of her remarks. She said, you want to have a place where you want to go to. And we very much feel that way. One thing I didn't mention is in this whole process, in the middle of this process, we moved from an older building that had been our home for 28 years, and we had grossly outgrown it, and it was really not a good space for us. to a brand new facility that we built, from not a new building, but we totally gutted the building and built it to our requirements. So the space is beautiful. People love being here, and we want to encourage that. And so I think, I don't know if reward is the right word, but I think we have to make it so that people want to be here. And by and large, I'm seeing that they do. And if they choose to work remotely, then they, have the tools, and we are pretty flexible about that. I think, again, Jamie, on that topic, I think Jamie, made good points about managing remote teams, making sure that your top talent feels like they have a choice and wants to stay, because, we're in a technology intensive industry, and we live and work in an area that's like the hottest technology market maybe in the country, possibly even hotter than California at this point. So we're constantly wanting to make sure that our employees have incentives to stay and feel comfortable. And Jamie said it, right? Hiring and retaining top talent is critical. So can't really, I haven't really thought about a way to say reward those who have to work here, but just make sure everybody enjoys working, feels safe. And if they need to work offsite, they work offsite.
Dave, that's a great segue to a quick question I asked Jamie in terms of recruitment. Given how hot the market is for the kind of technologists that businesses like yours need, plus how difficult it is for some employers to find employees post-COVID, what's your experience right now as it relates to recruitment?
Yeah, we recruited so we were, again, fortunate that we actually grew quite a bit during the year. And so we continue to hire. I don't know the exact number that we hired during COVID, but I'm going to guess more than 30. We're 100 and something person company. So probably a good 30% new employees. We did a lot of remote interviewing. So the interviewing process that we had adopted prior to COVID was very much face-to-face. We would bring in candidates for kind of a group meet, a presentation. There would be food involved. As Jamie said, that's a critical piece of our culture. So it was a very social thing that got both the current employees and the prospective employees engaged. And we dropped all that, and we went to the remote situation, and we onboarded people remotely. Certain employees have never come in, although most by now have come in, but we have plenty of people who spent the first month or two of their career with us not ever having set foot in the place. So we didn't really understand that, but now I think we have a process. The employees seem to understand it. Again, we have some people who also work geographically remotely, and now we realize we can do more of that. So we can hire people around the country and not necessarily relocate them to here. And we have some of those people, and they come in periodically to reestablish the bonds. So we're learning.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thanks very much, Dave. And we'll see you again in just a minute for the roundtable. Okay. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Scott Latham, Associate Professor of Strategic Management at UMass Lowell. He's focused on locally based research, some of which you might find especially provocative, which he'll share with us around this very subject, locally based research with direct application to the questions that we as employers and employees are facing at this juncture between remote learning and what may be the new normal, to use a phrase that we've been hearing a lot in the last 14 months. And like me, he also shaved today. So Dr. Latham, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Ken, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Enterprise Bank and the team. No doubt with UMass Lowell's, super trajectory over the past 10 years, Enterprise has played a huge role in that. So I want to thank Enterprise Bank. So as Ken mentioned, prior to COVID, I do a lot of research in what's being called the future of work, looking at how technology changes the nature of work. And then COVID hit, and it really accelerated a lot of my research agenda and caused me to pivot as to how companies were adapting. So I want to just have three main themes to my comments. The first, I want to do kind of a checkup on how the past year has gone relative to what we know. Second, some concerns I have moving forward with the nature of our work. And then third, some of the emergent best practices, who's doing it right. And so let me first talk a little about the past year. And the past year really has been a tale of two cities. And if you look at the research and you look at the surveys, the first 6 months, you saw a dramatic increase in productivity, worker morale. People really were, doing well under this hybrid or remote work from anywhere experiment. But around August, what you saw is the bottom fell out of it. And it fell out in a few different ways and for a few different reasons. So first of all, Harvard did a lot of research around worker productivity. And what they found is that worker productivity was really strong early on, and then right around August started to drop off. And the reason for that is a lot of the projects that were started with people in person in the office, they were able to complete those, but they had a real hard time starting new projects remotely. You also saw a significant rise in worker burnout. Both Monster.com and Indeed.com did mass surveys of workers, and worker burnout was at an all-time high. And people felt that they couldn't set boundaries around their work and personal life. The third thing that you saw was a dramatic drop in culture. And the primary reason for that is people cited that they missed the mentoring and coaching that they got from coworkers as well as their supervisors. So that was a problem. And then finally, for some of our local businesses and the economy, Massachusetts, and to Dave's point, we're arguably the most innovative, region in the country. Innovation and basic patents were down 10% over the last year in innovative industries like biotech, medical devices, the life sciences. And that's problematic. And the reason for that is that the serendipity that people need and bumping into each other at the office, working at lab benches, that was lacking. So we're really starting to see, the bloom come off the rose, if you would, relative to how we're working now. And I would say, though, that this isn't hybrid work. This was a fire drill. This is something we did in response to COVID. And hybrid work can be done in a way that can be managed. And that's, I think, one of the most important things that we have to think about. It's an opportunity for us to look at the business, redefine purpose, redesign the work, and, try to pivot for the long term, because the last year, again, I think we can't continue to work in the same way that we've been working, especially with regards to the last 6 months or so. Now, having said that, a lot of the research, again, is starting to look at some of the concerns we may have. And the first one is around the worker. And not everyone can do hybrid work. There are folks that need to get back to the office. They have familial obligations. They have space concerns at home. They have a hard time setting boundaries. The second thing, and Dave commented to it, a lot of the research is showing that there is a caste system emerging in organizations, people that can be flexible and people that can't be flexible. And from that, there's some resentment that's building, and that's, again, very corrosive to a culture. The other thing I would say is a lot of the case studies you're seeing, and I pay attention to them all, the companies that are doing well hybrid and managing the back to work paradigm, they're ones that have been doing it before COVID. We hear Google, we hear Twitter, all these companies, they've been doing it for a long time. This is not a light switch type of exercise. It has to, again, be managed, and it has to be gradual. Most people struggle because virtual working is a skill. It is a trained behavior. And you can't just tell people you'll be home 2 days a week and hope that to get the same level of productivity. And then finally, the technology just isn't there yet. Zoom is a virtual conferencing tool. There is technology out there that truly allows organizations to manage collaboration and innovation in a distributed virtual environment. And right now, a lot of those organizations haven't implemented those tools. And their workers aren't trained to use them. So what are some of the best practices that we're seeing? The first one is that whether or not you're going to go back to the office, remain hybrid, or be entirely virtual, it has to be a well-articulated plan. Locally, Miter Corporation down in Bedford, they did a great job early on. having worked with some of their employees and looked at the plans that they had, out of the gate, they had a plan that made a strong business case. And that's important too. Simply saying that you worked in the office prior to COVID and you'll need to work in the office after COVID isn't the right argument to be made. It's an exercise in change management. Why do you have to be where you are? The other thing that's emerging is that the decision more often than not has to be a team level decision, not an individual level decision about whether or not you're going back to the office or whether or not you're staying hybrid or virtual or working from anywhere. Because most people, again, that level of collaboration across the team gets incredibly disrupted when that decision is just made at the individual level. That's one of the other best practices. The technology is starting to emerge. Applications like Cave Day, FocusMate, Cluster, Microsoft Teams, we're starting to catch up relative to what we need. Another one that's important as far as the best practices is setting norms and boundaries. And around that, it's not about where you're working, it's about when you're working. Time is the thing that most individuals struggle with setting boundaries. So that's, again, an important consideration. And then finally, just having a tolerance for failure. Like I said, most of the companies being pointed to relative to they do work at home, hybrid, work from anywhere. Well, they've been doing it for a while. Most organizations haven't. So those are the three things that I wanted to say, and hopefully they complement some of the previous speakers. And thank you, Ken.
Terrific. Before I let you off the hook, Professor,
Sure.
Given your research, can you share with us the biggest surprise to you coming out of the research?
I think the level of worker burnout. I think it really does contradict with the anecdotal evidence. I think people put forth a public face about how they're bucking up relative to working at home or working from anywhere. But I think the research tells a very different story. I think people need relationships. I think people need, as I suggested, mentoring. They need coaching. If this past year is working against 10,000 years of evolution as to how humans organized, I don't want to get too academic. Even the way we learn, the whole notion of Zoom fatigue, if you go into the neuroscience research, we learn from cues around eyebrows, smiles, you name it. Not being able to do that taxes our ability to process information. That's why Zoom fatigue happens. It's not just a simple case of staring at a screen. Staring at a screen, we do it all day long with TVs. We don't learn from TVs. Staring at Zoom, where we're supposed to be processing information, that's why we get Zoom fatigue.
Got it. Got it. Thank you very much, Professor. And at this point, I'd like to call all panelists back in and invite our roundtable to commence. So you can take yourself off of mute, Jamie, and everybody else is off of mute. And I'll see the first question. And that's one that came in from one of our participants this morning. And it just happens to be around business travel. So based on businesses, employers for whom their employees sometimes need to travel, how are you handling, or how do you recommend those companies to handle the travel piece post-COVID?
Robbie, you said I should take a crack at that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we even had some limited business travel during the pandemic. Some of it was out of state, of course, and we were pretty careful then that people could do it, but then they had to follow all the guidelines, come back, wait the 3 days or whatever, then get the PCR test and then get a result back. So that meant that really people were forced remote for a week after travel when you incorporate the incubation time, the test, and then waiting for the test results. So that was an inconvenience, but we still recognize the need in certain cases to travel. Now that it's opening up, we have not yet seen a big demand for business travel. And I've read in Wall Street Journal and other places that the airlines themselves feel like that's going to be one of the last things to come back. Leisure travel is coming back hard, but they don't even see business travel going back to normal, quote unquote, normal until 2025, which is amazing. But certainly people will be traveling. And I think if it's domestic travel and everybody's sort of following similar protocols, I feel like it should not really be any different. And my anecdotal evidence from those who have traveled is the protocols that the car rental agencies and the hotels and so forth have adopted are incredibly good, very clean, all the kind of things we talked about earlier. So I don't really have concerns about that. International travel is a whole nother dimension. And I think one really has to look country by country at what they're doing. And if it's, and this may involve not just business travel, but going back home to relatives and so forth, we'll have to develop, we don't yet have that policy. And I think it's going to be important on a country by country basis to look at what the risks are for the returning person and whether we again adopt a, come back, wait, test, and then clear, which is the safest. Thank you.
Thank you. You just spurred another question, Dave, that I'll throw open to the panel, and that is around employees who have relatives who live in high-risk countries right now. And, we're all seeing the sad stories on the news around India and other countries that are seeing terrible spikes right now as ours are coming down just as quickly. And what are you all doing as relates to employee support when they've got parents or other relatives, close friends in those countries?
Well, I do have team members in human resources who have relatives, family, a mother in India, and it's just really kind of connecting with and checking in on and what can we do? What can we do to support you or support your mother? And how just simply asking, how are you doing and how is your mother doing?
Yeah, and to Scott's point about burnout being the biggest surprise that he took away from his research, burnout of remote workers, the lack of personal contact, the lack of mentoring, all the things that we get from being in work despite the commute and having to get dressed and all that. Have you seen that, Jamie and Dave? And if so, how have you handled it with those employees who are having a tough time remote working?
Well, I think for us, there was certainly a high volume of work through the pandemic period and a big rush, with the Paycheck Protection Program loan. So, once some of that subsided, it was really encouraging our team members to take some vacation time. Take some time off, do something else, step away from your computer. We offered, meditation and yoga and some other things to help people decompress. But it was really just saying you need to take some time. You need to rest and recharge. And then as the future waves of the Paycheck Protection Program came along, we actually did hire some additional support from outside the bank, I think, to also help with some of that fear of burnout. But again, it's just really, again, an individual person by person, meet people where they were at.
Got it. And before we go to Dave on the same question, did I see a video of Enterprise's CEO, Jack Clancy, actually leading yoga and meditation in the parking lot at one time, or did I dream that, Jamie?
No, you did not dream that. You did see it.
Okay, love it. Maybe that's a link we can release.
The leaders
else.
go first here, Ken.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dave, same question to you.
Well, I'd say on that, that's a great idea. And I know our VP of HR is on the video today. And so Sonia, we should think about yoga classes. I'm a big proponent of that myself. I want to circle back on that topic to some of Dr. Latham's points on the burnout. I believe that the challenge of remote work is an ecosystem challenge. So if a family has two kids, say, and I live this life, right? Two kids, both going to school remotely and vying for bandwidth time and personal space to do their schoolwork in the apartment or in the house, especially if it's apartment. And maybe both spouses are working remotely and trying to juggle all that. And as Dr. Latham said, there's no sort of personal touch points at work, and there's not the usual supports of sort of community engagement. I mean, Zoom church. You don't go out to eat with your friends. In my case, at least in the spring, fortunately not after that, sports went away, which was a big thing for my kids. So I think when you put all that together, you get a tremendous amount of stress, of which remote working is a part, because you never can leave the house, let's say. But what I believe to be true is that schools, everybody's going back, full time. Now we have vacations coming. That's a little different, but kids are back in school. There'll be some social engagements where you can go out to eat with people or eat in the backyard. Church will come back in some form, etc. And I think that will relieve a lot of that pressure. And then we look at remote work as a component of work. And if you're home that day, you might be by yourself in the house, and maybe that's not so bad. Maybe that's a kind of a break. The other piece was sort of mentioned, and it's not nothing, because traffic is coming back tremendously. The ability not to have to commute for a lot of our workers, and I think workers all around the greater Boston area, can add 2 hours a day. Now, I get it that, there is a blurring of personal and work time that was happening already because of the remote tools that we have. I mean, we're on our email, we're expected to be on our email basically every waking hour. So there's already been a blurring of those boundaries. But I think if you remove the stress of 2 hours a day of driving, and you say, what can I do with that time? Some of it can go to work, and some of it shouldn't go to work, should be, sleeping more or doing something else. But it's extra time that we didn't have before. So I think it's really incumbent on all of us as leaders to try to, again, create this culture where it's acceptable to work remotely if you can stay productive, and if it's not all the time, let's say, and that gives some emotional and mental relief from the different grind, which is to get up, get the kids ready, jump in the car, fight traffic, rinse and repeat. So I think, we have an opportunity here as leaders to really make it a better world in that regard.
Got it. Jamie and Scott, anything you want to add or address to Dave's points before I go on to the next subject?
No.
Nothing,
Okay.
thanks, Ken.
Okay. This may have already been addressed, but a question that came in this morning from Lori is requiring unvaccinated individuals to wear a mask while vaccinated individuals do not have to. Is that considered discriminatory? Do we still require all people to wear masks? We want to open our office safely and are unsure of this protocol. Who would like to take that one?
I'm happy to start it if anyone else wants to jump in.
No, I was going to call on you, Jamie. Go ahead.
It doesn't appear to be discriminatory. It's what could happen as a result, decisions that are made based on that, vaccinated individuals or not vaccinated individuals. It's what could happen as a result of knowing that information, and whether you have someone in the office, you treat them differently with work assignments or other things could be considered discriminatory.
Okay.
And I think the other thing that we learned throughout the pandemic was that, the physical distancing is also, another way to be safe. And so, is there a way to provide physical distancing as opposed to requiring all people to wear masks? So, ventilation, air purification, all of those things, have to be considered too within the building.
Got it. Did Enterprise do anything different as relates to that last piece, Jamie? The HVAC, the purification, any of that with all of your offices and, square footage?
A lot of our office spaces have been renovated over time, or branches are brand new. So a lot of our systems are pretty well up to date or have been upgraded. So we did look at that. We didn't do anything different yet. Well, that's something that we are taking a look at. Should we do something differently as we look to bring larger groups of people back to our campus in Lowell? Because the other thing in Lowell that we did with our campuses, which was to have a more open work environment. And so, this is a little bit counterproductive to what the pandemic would suggest. So, we're looking at all those things as we come back to the office.
Got it. Thank you. A question that just came in for you, Dr. Latham. Do you have any published research or anything you can point everybody to as relates to your research on this subject, or anything that relates?
Sure. Let me make two comments on that. You know, the first, I wouldn't be a professor in good standing if I didn't give everyone homework. So, and some specifics. The best piece of research I've seen so far comes from an individual from Harvard. Her name's Linda Grattan, and it's a handy dandy quadrant model. And basically, I saw a question come in on the plan, and what's a good plan? A good plan now is transparent. The worst thing you can do is have a subjective, ambiguous plan relative to individuals across the organization. There has to be a transparent plan that says who works at home, why they work at home, then schedules it relative to time and space. That is the best COVID plan. If you don't do that, then you start to create the caste system, you start to erode the culture, and you're really setting yourself up for problems down the road is what's going to happen. So that article in the Harvard Business Review is called Doing Hybrid Right. And that's what this matrix is from. It came out last month. It's a 4 or 5 page read, I think, from my sense, and I caucus all the research out there. If I was a manager, and I worked in the software industry for 15 years, lived in Japan, Sweden, London, I've done distributed work. It's a great read. So that's the first point. With regards to my own research, UMass Lowell has a relationship with a publication called The Conversation. If you Google The Conversation and Scott Latham, the thing they do nice is they basically funnel down really high level, boring academic research to, nice, nuggets of things that people can use. So, and I can share a link with some of the stuff I've done there. So
Terrific. That's great. And I assume that links like that we'll be able to share with all attendees and participants. Excellent. Okay, I'm watching the time. It's 9:58. Before I go to the next wrap up phase, is there anything else our panelists would like to join? This has been extremely informative.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that, what Dr. Latham just mentioned. I think, developing a clear policy and communicating clearly is critical. I think we did an okay job at communication during the period, but now I sense we're sort of relaxed about it. We're just glad to be back. And I think it's a good takeaway to, stay vigilant and maybe develop some clarity around policies. I know that our general counsel is also on the call, and that's something we should definitely look at. So thank you for that.
Terrific. All right, well, thank all of you from the bottom of our heart. This has been extremely interesting and timely. So thank you for the time you put into this and sharing your thoughts and research. Now I'd like to turn to my friend and colleague at Enterprise, Chet Zablak. Chet is Executive Vice President, Chief Sales Community, Customer Relationship Officer, and so much more at Enterprise. It just doesn't all fit on the card. So Chet, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ken. And thanks for being such a great host this morning and for moderating such a wonderful discussion with our panelists. I'd also like to thank Scott Latham from UMass Lowell, Dave Modell from Triton Systems, and Jamie Gabriel for all of your insights and input regarding how to meet these challenges that are put upon us by the pandemic in our work environments. This is our second presentation of our Business Leadership Forum, and we'll continue these presentations going forward. Our goal is to present you with valuable topics of discussion to assist with your decision business making. And again, on behalf of Enterprise Bank, thank you for being here. We hope you have a wonderful day, and please take care. Thank you.